Hey, how you doing? It's Dave Corlett here from the creative agency Shaped by. Welcome to the Changemakers, episode number 42, part 3. If you haven't joined us before, the Changemakers is our series that's all about creativity in B2B tech. And this episode in particular is looking at Fintech and specifically the role that brand and design within that brand journey plays in driving Fintech brands, I suppose, from slightly more underdog and challenger brands a few years ago into the mainstream brands that many of them are today. Now, part 3 is a little bit different to the previous parts 1 and 2 in that I've got a slightly different relationship with our guest. He hired me 4 years ago. We worked really closely together. It's our founder and managing director, Nick Farrar. Now, Nick has run Shaped by for the last 18 plus years and has been involved in marketing and branding for 20 plus. So he's got a really, really interesting take. He's kind of seen it all really when it comes to financial services, from working with really established global businesses through to some of the more exciting fintech companies that are around today. So I really was interested to get Nick's take on this subject in terms of the fintech companies that he thinks are kind of killing it today from a brand point of view, where the opportunities are to stand out and be bold from a brand perspective, and lots more. So here's what Nick had to say. Hey Nick, how you doing? Welcome to the Changemakers.
Hello Dave, I'm very, very well. And yourself?
Yeah, good. Last working day of 2023. Feels a bit strange, doesn't it?
I know. This year has absolutely flown by. I don't know where it's gone, but I'm looking forward to a bit of downtime over Christmas and New Year.
Yeah, me too. And looking forward to this conversation as well. I know that, over 18 years of running this agency, you've worked with brands of all different shapes and sizes, many of them in finance, from kind of more, I suppose you'd call them more traditional, financial institutions and organizations through to fintech brands. So, it's going to be a really interesting conversation. I just wanted to start with, I suppose, a fairly kind of universal and basic question, really. So from your point of view, how can fintech brands elevate themselves and their brands through design?
Gosh, how long have I got? I mean, first of all, 18 years makes me sound very, very old. But there we go. There's a host of areas that fintech companies can elevate their brand through design. And I've been trying to think of situations that are unique to this sector, but in reality, the areas are fairly similar for a load of different types of businesses, both across B2B and B2C. Although I guess some of them are more pertinent to the fintech sector. The biggest one for me, and I think I'll start off with something which may seem like a catch-all for all businesses, but it's probably the most important one for me, and that is the design, and by that I mean good design, kind of well-considered design, can really help you demonstrate your point of difference. It will help you stand out from the competition and make you recognizable and memorable. And this is key for everyone, but I guess it's specifically important for fast-moving sectors where new brands, new disruptor brands are emerging all the time. So, I guess that's really relevant for the fintech sector.
Yeah, I think so. We've already had a couple of chats with our guests already on this subject. Our other two guests, Michael and Aaron, I don't quite know which order this is going out in, but we've had those conversations already. We talked about this, the fact that, you can look at fintech in isolation to a certain extent. It's very fast moving. It's seen as a kind of challenger industry, I suppose, or sub-industry of the financial world, trying to kind of go up against some fairly big institutions that are fairly kind of established. But ultimately, it has its own, it's like any market or any sector in the sense that, you still need to stand out and make an impression in order to get a foothold and in order to essentially build your brand. You talked about, they need to do that. Companies need to do that. How do you actually do that in practice from your point of view? What are the kind of basic steps that companies need to take to really make themselves stand out?
We spend most of our time talking with clients and with peers, talking about how they can stand out and have that point of difference. But I think, the main point of difference is that you have to come across as being authentic, and that your messaging and your story has to be authentic. And so for me, a big priority with this journey is that the founders are behind the brand, and the founders are behind what you're doing with the brand. If they are excited about the whole journey, then it kind of gives you three tools to work with. First of all, you're going to have access to the people in your company who are best placed to tell your brand story, and understand, your particular point of difference or your particular uniqueness. The second thing, you get that insight, but secondly, if they're excited to be on the brand journey, you're more likely to get their ongoing input into brand activity. So I remember when Zip rebranded, a couple of years ago, Larry Diamond, their CEO, was super active in the launch of the brand and the rollout of the brand. And that had a real impact from kind of me looking at the brand from the outside and seeing how it evolved after the rebrand. And finally, if you have, the founders on board with this idea of investing in creativity for the good of building bettering your company, then you're going to get that long-term commitment to invest in quality brand activity. And, that's what you need to be a success and start to realize your ambition. So the main thing for me is that design can massively help you get your points different across. That's the main thing design can do for you. And that's a load easier if you've got founders and senior team who recognize the power of design.
But I do think that's a really, really interesting point, because, if you look at the reason why a lot of fintech founders set up their businesses, as I said before, the chances are it probably is to disrupt quite a staid and traditional industry in terms of the finance industry. And I'm generalizing a little bit there, but I think that is true for quite a lot of fintech businesses. So, they are natural disruptors. And I think that when you start to put brand into that category of areas that you need to disrupt within, I think that you're naturally going to find within fintech companies, founders and leaders who are more inclined to go along on that journey. I think that's a really, really interesting point. Are there any kind of fintech companies in particular that you think are nailing that at the moment?
Yeah, there are loads. There are so many strong brands within fintech and brands who are kind of elevating that brand through really strong visual language. I know that a couple of them are contributing to this podcast, but I've been a big fan of Klarna. Recently, pretty in pink. Great design, really strong messaging, and that incredible influencer marketing strategy that just kind of makes you smile and ticks all those boxes about standing out from the crowd, having your own personality, being memorable, wanting people to share the content you have. So, yeah, for me, Klarna are nailing it at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, big fan of Klarna. I quite like some of the like Robinhood, some of those kind of retail investing apps and brands as well, that have to really distinguish themselves, not just from a brand point of view, but from a product and the user experience, UX point of view, becomes really important when you're engaging with, actually, I suppose most fintech brands really, to a certain extent, but certainly those ones. And actually, speaking of that, so just wanted to move on. We when we talk about design, or when we've kind of talked about it so far in this 5 minutes or so, we've kind of lent towards the kind of brand side of things, that kind of overarching brand look and feel that design touches so well. But as I mentioned just there, there are lots of other areas that design has to play a massive role in terms of engagement with audiences. What other areas like that do you think that fintech companies can benefit from really impactful and great design?
Yeah, again, there are a lot more, and these aren't unique to fintech, but I feel that they're certainly relevant. And I think one area that is really relevant in fintech, we talk about disruptive brands within this industry, but actually, you have to build trust within this sector in order to be recognized and to flourish. So I feel that establishing and building trust is another key area where really good design can have an impact. As I say, that is vital for fintech companies. You need to have that well-considered design language that makes you look established, and that is fundamental. Most companies, these disruptor companies, they'll go from that journey from being this kind of mad scientist startup scale phase where they're kind of building the products and building the platforms, but then eventually you have to come across as a trusted solution, an established trusted solution for people to, to have the faith to use your products and services. So how you portray yourself externally through your design can really help to speed up that process and build up trust, that process and that journey from startup scale up to being a more kind of, established, trustworthy brand.
Yeah, definitely. And just to your mind, is there anyone in your view that is doing that side of things particularly well?
Yeah, I think so. I think loads of people do it so well, but I think sometimes when you're building this trust stuff, then it's not so much about the bells and the whistles. It's about kind of consistency. I think that Coinbase do this pretty well. Their visual language and their messaging really emphasizes security and trust. They have super clear messaging around the security measures that they're delivered, and they're delivered in a kind of clean, crisp, no nonsense way. For me, that approach really helps to build confidence with their users and their potential users.
Yeah, definitely. Big fan of Coinbase. Still look back on that Super Bowl ad so fondly. I just think
Yeah,
that when you're talking about
it's
disruption and creativity, it ticks all of those
some,
boxes in such
yeah,
an irreverent way.
but some of it is beautifully understated, and I think that's a nice way to build trust. It's that kind of, you have utter confidence when you look at their website or you read some of their messaging, or you're looking at their app. It's like, okay, I get these guys. I trust them.
Yeah, which is quite a big thing in that whole world. But yeah, cryptocurrency really could do with that element of trust for sure. And I agree. Yeah, Coinbase do it very, very well. Any other areas in particular that you think design has an opportunity to help and elevate?
Yeah, kind of another thought I thought was interesting was this idea of helping to build a sense of community. So it's not just in maybe the messaging and the look of the brand, but really applying real consideration to intuitive design across their platforms and their apps. So kind of make it easy for users to navigate and perform financial transactions. So kind of like, I really like what Revolut are doing here. Their brand ethos is built on innovation and financial inclusion. Aiming to bring financial services to a global audience, bring financial services to the masses, and this really comes through with the way that their design comes across visually. And then, I guess, finding another way, that area I really like is where companies are using creative thinking and great design and using that in unexpected ways. So I'm kind of thinking, of maybe gamification here. Fintech apps are increasingly using gamification to enhance customer motivation and engagement. It's a sector which is still experiencing massive growth, and so standing out becomes crucial. And this gamification, kind of incorporating game-like elements into non-game contexts, is a real effective strategy for fintech companies.
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to be a little bit careful sometimes with gamification. I think, there are certain pros and cons. The pros are that it can really help in areas like saving. So if you bring a kind of game-like experience to the concept of saving money, it can really help people to not just understand a little bit more about it, but actually do it really, really well and actually commit to that process, which I think is great. But by the same token, and I'm not necessarily saying I disagree with this, by the way, but the way that I mentioned Robinhood earlier, but the way that brands like that kind of bring an element of gamification into investing can trivialize it, I think, in some ways, and for some people, and make it seem there's a serious nature to investing, as you know. You can obviously,
Yeah.
worst case scenario, you can lose your money, but by bringing gamification into that, is that a good thing or not? I don't know. So who do you feel is doing that side of things?
It's interesting that you say that, because the whole thing about gamification, if you look at online gambling, whatever it is, it can drive behavioural change, and that can be for good and for bad, and we have to be very, very careful, obviously, using what people might perceive as gimmicks to for such important areas as financial services. But you talk about Robinhood. I think that somebody who is using gamification really, really well for good is Fortune City. That they've nailed this. Their whole platform is based on gamification. That unique approach to expense tracking and budgeting. It's an awesome use of how gamification can really help people to manage their finances better. It's been massively successful for them. I just checked before the podcast, and they've had over 5 million downloads on the App Store, and a 4.7 star rating. So it's really, it really is, a successful use of gamification in this sector.
But listen, on a serious note, I think it's a really interesting point about gamification. I just wondered if we could just finish off by talking a little bit about design in gamification, because obviously, we know a lot about the tactic of gamification itself in terms of what it's intending to encourage people to do. But do you have any thoughts on the role that good design plays in that whole process? Whether it's animation, whether it's characters, as in kind of Duolingo. What are your thoughts on that?
But again, I think it's going to sound like a bit of a boring answer, actually. But good design is only ever the answer of a really strong brief. So I feel that any design in gamification, any design of a website, any design of an app, we have to start off with a real strong understanding of what that app is there to achieve. What their audiences are, what their audience pains are, and take those and then fit a design that helps to solve that creative brief. So whether that is at a particular age group or at a particular social standing, or solving particular problems, you can't. I think you have to be very, very careful that you don't trivialize what are potentially really, really important things. We spoke previously about investing, and there are real risks to investment. The gauging people's appetite for taking those risks with investment is massively, massively important. And so you have to make sure that anything that you do within your apps and within your website, which is there to gamify these things, aren't trivializing what are very, very important circumstances for people. So I say that's have a really strong brief, which is backed up by a real strong understanding and a really strong strategy. And if you have those parameters, then if you stick to that brief, then the designs can't be wrong. Obviously, there's a whole level of subjectivity where people have opinions about what you're doing, but start with the brief, start with the strategy, and have the design fit that. And whether that is animation, film, games, characters, whatever it may be, that's then part of that creative process and part of that design process to bring that brief and strategy to life.
Absolutely. A great point to end on. All right. Thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks for your time. You can put your feet up now. Have a lovely Christmas.
And you, mate, I'll see you in the new year.